Nothing flows until you finally let go. And most people never will. They hold on because it's familiar, because it hurts in a way they understand. Because letting go means admitting that what they built their identity on was never real. And for most, the pain of that realization is too much. So they cling to old wounds, old rows, old stories. They turn their trauma into a trophy and wonder why peace never visits their doorstep. But here's the truth. The dam doesn't break until you stop reinforcing it. You say you want freedom, but you keep feeding the chains. You say you want clarity, but you won't stop playing God with timing. You say you want power, but you keep outsourcing it to people who don't even know who they are. Let go? Number. You argue with reality. You romanticize red flags. You rationalize your own suffocation. You sit in the prison cell and decorate the walls instead of breaking the door open. You call it self-awareness, but it's self-betrayal, because you know what needs to be released. You know what no longer serves. You know the weight that's keeping your soul underwater. But knowing means nothing if you won't move, because nothing flows until you finally let go. Carl Jung didn't say, cling to the past to heal it. He said, what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size, meaning your grip is your curse. The more you clutch, the more it controls you. The more you replay, the more it programs you. The more you delay letting go, the more it devours your capacity to evolve. This is syphoria, the psychological paralysis of gripping an illusion so tightly that it becomes your prison. And the tragic irony is the key has always been in your hands. But you don't want the key. You want the door to disappear. You want the pain to resolve without the death of your old self. But no resurrection comes without a crucifixion. Something has to die. And if you keep protecting it, nothing can be born. You say, I can't let go. Number, you mean you won't. Because letting go requires the one thing most people fear more than anything else: responsibility. Responsibility for your power, responsibility for your peace, responsibility for the void that comes when you stop defining yourself by what broke you. That void, that terrifying silence, that's not emptiness. That's space. And space is where the flow begins. But you have to clear it. You have to unclog the channel. You have to take your hands off the past and stop trying to reanimate it. You're not a gravekeeper. You're not a memory manager. You are a force of becoming, but only if you get out of your own way. You say, but I'm waiting for a sign. Let this be it. Let this be the moment you stop trying to swim while chained to an anchor. Let this be the second you realize that every ounce of resistance is a prayer to stay stuck. That every excuse is a devotion to a God that doesn't serve you. You don't need more time. You don't need more healing. You don't need more permission. You need to decide, because nothing flows until you finally let go. Not halfway. Not with conditions. Not while checking the rearview mirror. Let go of the identity you built around being abandoned. Of the story that says you're too late. Of the addiction to being needed, understood, pitied. Of the fear that if you're not hurting, you're not growing. Let go, because holding on isn't strength, it's stagnation. Holding on isn't loyalty, it's self-abandonment. Holding on isn't awareness, it's ego masquerading as wisdom. Real wisdom knows when to release. Real wisdom knows that peace doesn't come from resolution. It comes from surrender. Surrender to what was. Surrender to what I learned. Surrender to the fact that some chapters close not because they failed, but because they fulfilled. And when you finally surrender, when you truly let go, everything shifts. You start hearing your own voice again. You start feeling the pulse of life instead of the echoes of memory. You start moving not from fear, but from instinct, from alignment, from vision. Because the flow doesn't come from effort. It comes from space, from clearing the debris, from burning the old contracts you made in desperation. Flow comes when your hands are free to receive. but they can't receive if they're still wrapped around ghosts. So let them go. Not because they were never real, but because you are. Because you are real. And that means your healing must be real too. No more pretending. No more poetic pain that sounds profound but keeps you stuck. No more half-healed mantras masking full-blown fear. No more disguising resistance as self-care. Because you don't need more comfort, you need clarity. And clarity doesn't come with a soft touch. It comes with fire. The kind of fire that burns illusions until only truth remains. The kind of fire that demands sacrifice not of your soul, but of your suffering. The kind of fire that says, you don't get to carry yesterday into tomorrow and still expect to fly. You can't soar with a past on your back that was meant to be compost, not cargo. You were not built to repeat cycles. You were built to break them, but you cannot break what you still protect. You cannot change what you keep excusing. You cannot evolve while clinging to what expired. And most people don't change not because they can't, but because they're still getting a payoff from staying the same, from being the one who was wronged, from carrying the wound like a flag, from using the pain as proof that they deserve something. But let me tell you what you deserve. You deserve release. You deserve peace that doesn't need performance. You deserve movement that doesn't come from misery. You deserve to flow. But flow is not gifted, it's chosen. And choosing flow means choosing death. The death of who you were when you were addicted to control. The death of your obsession with being understood by people incapable of seeing you. The death of the narrative that says you must hold on to your pain to remain whole. Number, you were whole before the pain. You were whole in the breaking. You are whole now, but only if you stop breaking yourself to stay loyal to what already left. Letting go is not betrayal. It is return. A return to rhythm. A return to intuition. A return to the quiet, sovereign power that says, if it requires me to shrink, to silence, to settle, it's not mine. Because what's truly yours will never require you to grip. It will meet you in peace, in resonance, in trust. So if you're still holding on, ask yourself why. What are you afraid will happen if you let go? What have you convinced yourself you can't live without? What story are you still starring in that ended seasons ago? This is where you confront the root. This is where the shadow is no longer your enemy, but your initiation. This is where you stop begging for peace to find you while you build altars to your old identity. You don't find peace. You become it. You become peace when you let the war end. The war within. The war between who you are and who you pretend to be. The war between the timeline you wanted and the one you're being led to. You become peace when you stop being a hostage to your own history. And that happens in a single moment, a holy moment, when you say, I release it all. Not because I'm weak, but because I'm finally strong enough to be free. And in that moment, when your grip loosens, when your breath deepens, when your spirit stops bracing for what already happened long ago, everything begins to move. Not with noise, not with drama, but with flow. The river doesn't shout when it breaks the dam. It just moves. It reclaims its direction. It finds its depth. It obeys nothing but gravity and truth. And so do you, because once you let go, you stop forcing your way forward and start being drawn. Drawn by something real, something ancient, something that's been waiting behind the wall of everything you refuse to release. The weight was never the problem. It was the way you carried it. You held it like it was sacred, like you owed it loyalty, like pain made you more credible. But credibility doesn't come from suffering. It comes from rising, from becoming the version of yourself that no longer needs to suffer to be awake, that no longer needs to hurt to prove you have depth, that no longer sees loss as identity but as initiation. Because letting go isn't just an act, it's an initiation into a higher mind, a deeper rhythm, a wilder peace, the kind that doesn't flinch when the past tries to seduce you, the kind that doesn't shrink when old voices echo through your memories, the kind that doesn't look back to measure progress but forward, with vision untouched by the dust of yesterday. This is where the real shift begins, not when the world changes, but when you do. When you no longer wait for apologies that will never come. When you no longer keep doors cracked just in case they return. When you no longer need to replay the scene one more time to understand what you already know. This is when the healing stops being theoretical. This is when the transformation becomes tangible. You feel lighter, not just in your body, but in your being. You don't have to think your way through the day. You move, not with resistance, but with rhythm, not with strategy, but with sovereignty. Because flow is the natural state of the unburdened. And when you are no longer burdened by what isn't yours to carry, you become undeniable, not loud, not dramatic, but immovable, the kind of presence that silences noise, the kind of energy that clears rooms without raising its voice, the kind of peace that radiates because it has nothing to prove. Letting go gave you that. Not time, not healing, not even understanding, just release. Because the moment you stop negotiating with the past, the future rushes to meet you. But it only meets the real you, the one who is ready to let everything fall that was built in fear and rise in trust, unforced, unchained, unstoppable. Unstoppable not because you push harder, but because you no longer push at all. You pull with presence, with gravity, with the force of someone who's finally remembered what it feels like to be rooted in their own essence, not reaching for life, but becoming it. Because that's what happens when you let go, not just of people or pasts, but of the entire scaffolding that held up a version of you built for survival. You let go of control and gain power. You let go of timelines and find timing. You let go of resistance and unlock rhythm. And rhythm is everything. It's the silent symphony behind greatness, the invisible law of elevation, the thing that makes people stare and say, how did they do it? While you just smile because you didn't do it. Not in the way they think. You let it happen. You allowed it. You surrendered to the pull instead of the pressure. You flowed and the current carried you farther than force ever could. You stopped trying to break the door down and let the right one swing open without effort. This is the paradox that most will never grasp when you stop striving. You start arriving. Because striving says, I am not enough yet. Flow says, I already am, and now I simply align with what's mine. But alignment cannot come where there is tension. It cannot rest where you are gripping. It cannot land in hands still closed around fear. So open your hands, open your lungs, open your life to something that doesn't require explanation, only expression. Because you are not here to explain yourself to a world addicted to chaos. You are here to embody the opposite of chaos, clarity. And clarity is born in the fire of letting go. You let go of the story that kept you small. You let go of the identity built on being hurt. You let go of the belief that healing must be loud, long, and filled with pain. It doesn't. It just has to be real. And what's real is simple. So simple it scares the mind that's been trained to chase. But your soul knows. It always knew. That's why it kept pulling. That's why the pressure never truly broke you. It bent you toward release. It bent you toward this moment. The moment you finally stop gripping the wound. The moment you finally stop waiting for the perfect closure. The moment you say, I'm done holding what's already passed. I'm done being the curator of my own suffering. I'm done confusing resistance with discipline and clenching with strength. And in that breath, that one breath of release, everything begins again. The moment you let go is the moment you reclaim the future, not by reaching, not by forcing, but by allowing it to meet the version of you that's finally ready to receive. Now, let it come. Let it come not because you've earned it, but because you've cleared the space. Not because you figured it all out, but because you finally stopped pretending that you need to. You've made peace with not knowing. You've stopped demanding clarity from chaos. You've stopped trying to heal through force. And now life can breathe through you, because that's what Flow Island. It's breath. It's what happens when the tension in your jaw finally melts, when your chest stops guarding, when your fists unclench and your nervous system says, we're safe now. You can release. And in that release, something ancient wakes up, something that existed long before your overthinking, before your anxiety, before your attachment to outcomes, and your fear of letting go. It is your knowing, not the knowledge they fed you, not the information you chased, but the knowing that lived in your bones before they were ever broken. That knowing now has space to rise, because you stopped trying to control the river and started becoming the ocean. And no one commands the ocean. It doesn't rush. It doesn't chase. It doesn't explain itself. It simply moves with truth. That's what you are now, unrushed, unfolding, unattached to the version of life that once demanded your suffering as a form of validation. You don't need to hurt to be worthy. You don't need to strive to be seen. You don't need to cling to pain to prove that it mattered. You only need to trust the pull of release, to feel the current that's been there all along, beneath the debris, beneath the noise, beneath every version of you that tried so hard to hold it all together. But nothing flows until you finally let go. And now you have, and now it begins. And now it begins not with a bang, but with breath. Not with a roar, but with resonance. Because real beginnings aren't loud. They're rooted. They don't arrive with fireworks. They emerge like the dawn, quiet, inevitable, unstoppable. This is the moment your old life exhales its final breath, and your true self opens its eyes not in fear, but in full possession of your power. No more rehearsing your trauma like a script. No more performing for people who never learned to clap for the quiet strength. No more gripping empty hands and calling it love. No more trying to fix what was only meant to be released. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough to set it free. It means you finally loved yourself more than the version of life that required your suffering. And from that place, from that wholly hollowed out stillness, you start to build. Not with desperation, not with exhaustion, but with clarity. You don't build to prove. You don't build to win. You don't build to fill the void. You build because your soul is finally clear enough to create without clinging. You build with boundaries, not walls. With standards, not scarcity. With direction, not noise. Because now you're not just letting go, you're letting rise. Letting rise the voice beneath the silence. The strength beneath the softness. The vision beneath the waiting. And everything you touch now carries a different frequency, not born from pressure, but from purpose. You walk different. You speak different. You breathe different. Because the weight is gone. The fog is gone. The story is done. Not because you ran from it, but because you finally closed the book. And in that sacred closing, without drama, without defense, you opened a new door. A door only visible to the ones brave enough to walk empty, to walk healed, to walk whole. So go. Don't look back. Don't check if the old weight is still there. It's not. It's already buried in the space you cleared for your freedom. You let go. And now you flow. And as you flow, you realize something profound. You were never chasing the thing. You were chasing the state, the feeling behind the thing, the calm behind the chaos, the safety behind the struggle, the freedom behind the force. And now, stripped of the noise, you see it clearly. Everything you were reaching for was already inside you, buried beneath what you refused to release. It wasn't the job. It wasn't the person. It wasn't the approval. It was the self who could stand still in the storm and not break. The self who could lose the world and not lose their way. The self who could release all attachments and still feel full. This is where you are now. Not at the end. but at the edge of true beginning. You no longer run toward life, you meet it. Eye to eye, breath to breath, power to power. No masks, no roles, no grip. And because of that, life responds differently. It yields, it mirrors, it opens. It bends not to your will, but to your willingness to move in truth, to act without clinging, to speak without pleasing, to love without possession, to stand in your fire and not apologize for the heat. This is your inheritance, not just flow, but freedom in flow. A freedom that doesn't come from arrival, but from release. You've released, and now you are free. Not because life changed, but because you did. Because you chose to stop worshiping what already left. Because you decided your peace was more important than your performance. Because you finally understood that nothing will ever flow, no relationship, no idea, no abundance, no calling, until you let go of everything that blocks it. And now, here you are, unblocked, unburdened, unchained, and nothing is more powerful than a soul that no longer clings. You let go, and in that letting go, you became the flow. You became the flow, not a part of it, not a wave crashing within it, but the source, the pulse, the sacred current itself. And now, you don't need to force what aligns. You don't need to grip what resonates. You don't need to suffer to evolve, because you've come home not to a place, not to a person, but to a presence, your own. You've remembered the truth that life has been whispering all along. Nothing flows until you finally let go. Let go of the need to be understood. Let go of the fear that you are too much or not enough. Let go of the timelines they gave you, the identities you borrowed, the roles you were never meant to keep. Let go of the wound you turned into a compass. Let go of the shame you stitched into your name. Let go of what already served its purpose so your purpose can finally serve you. Because this isn't the end. This is the crossing. This is the day you rise, not on a wave of effort, but on the stillness that comes from radical surrender. You didn't break down. You broke open. And from this open space, this infinite, rooted, unstoppable space, you are now a channel for power, for clarity, for peace that doesn't waver when the world does. This is what freedom feels like. No war left to fight, no weight left to carry. Just breath, just presence, just truth. And you, finally, fully, unapologetically, free